Hello, in this video we're going to discuss Yorky the Black Knight of Kent, Part 4. So, after Galahad was king of the UK, he was king of the entire country, including Scotland. He had a good positive influence on the people, and they benefited greatly from his influence, which is why God, Nathan, Joshua and Gabriel wanted to come to earth as knights, to be like Galahad. In Galahad's case, the country had extensive farming and no one went hungry. Galahad was murdered by Longshanks. That's how Longshanks come into power. And Longshanks also murdered Galahad's family when he took over. He divided the United Kingdom into England, Wales and Scotland, and was a tyrant. He also destroyed all the farms, and so people went hungry because of his tyranny. He was in fact possessed by a Shura, and it was his laws working alongside the King of Scotland. So he made a King of Scotland who was possessed by Baal. They made an arrangement so that Englishmen could rape Scottish women whenever they wanted. And that leads us to another angel who's a martyr, William Wallace. But that is another story. William Wallace was an archangel from heaven, or is an archangel from heaven, and that was his martyrdom, along with his wife, who was also murdered, which you see in the movie that Mel Gibson made, although the story is quite different. There are some details. So the situation in England when Yorky was knighted was after Longshanks was King George I, who's George II's father, and after George II, Queen Victoria. So all they had to drink back then was water or goat's milk. Now when the Romans were there, they brought wine with them, but not a single Englishman or woman ever got to drink it. It was strictly just the Romans. The Romans left England and evacuated to Rome when Spartacus and his people had their when they had their uprising. So there was no beef or sheep in the area. People had to hunt birds, deer, goats, whatever they could find in order to survive. And there was no potatoes. So that was another problem. So the French had beef and the Scots had sheep. Both were unwilling to trade. So part of Yorky's mission was to travel to China, and he established a trade route with China, which still exists to this day, which although it's different now than what it used to be. So originally it passed through Afghanistan, but one day the Afghanistan king decided to arrest and detain the knights and people who were doing the caravan that was passing through there, which had all the tea that was being transported. He held them and killed them. So Yorky went in there and killed, he wiped out the entire army in Afghanistan, and they found they kept having problems there, so they decided to go around Afghanistan, and that's what the route is to this day. So they got tea into England, but it was disappointing because the type of tea that Yorky was after was not there. So the tea that Yorky was after was mint tea, but the archangel that was sent to earth to discover tea he did not come across that type of tea in the area where he lived, and he searched everywhere for it and still could not find it. So he had to settle with the type of tea that he had discovered. We do know that mint tea is on Earth, the type that I'm talking about, and is yet to be found. This one particular type. So Yorky influenced George II to go to France. They did some jousting and then established trade of tea for beef. And this changed things in England because up to then even the king went hungry and had to eat worms. It was pretty terrible. The tea was traded with Scotland for sheep, and so it increased their resources in the area, and finally people weren't going as hungry as before. They also managed to get potatoes in there. Some villages had survived solely on worms because of Satan and his followers, who wouldn't allow people to farm in some areas. So there were a lot of homeless people, and they were surviving on whatever they could find. So regarding wine, tea was traded with France for wine as well, and then later coffee was traded with France for wine. And tea was traded with Belgium for beer, and Yorky brought back with him from Belgium equipment to set up a brewery in England, which still exists to this day. And so that's how beer was brought into England, and wine. So that's how those resources were brought in. And then later with Queen Victoria, with the Commonwealth established, those resources could be shared and traded among the Commonwealth countries. With regard to these trade routes, after Noah's flood, machinery was brought to earth and work parties of angels and artificial intelligence, and they created the roads which people on this day believe that the Romans made. So there are roads and bridges that were put there by heaven that no one knows about. All the roads in England that were there were already there even during Galahad's time. Some of the roads go across to China and other countries, even Israel. So this network of roads was constructed by heaven after Noah's flood in order to support these trade routes. With regard to the United States, during King George II's time, he brought in a law against slavery. Some people in the United States, well, back then in America, were not happy with this and wanted to continue slavery. So they formed a rebellion. It wasn't a matter of opposing a tyrant in the United States regarding England. They boarded a ship and threw the tea off the side. And Battlemeck was the captain of the ship, and he was not impressed with what occurred. They forged people's signatures, including Thomas Edison, and made a declaration of independence from England. So this set things back as far as heaven's plans for America were concerned. Archangels were sent to earth, to the United States, to fight against the South, who supported slavery. And after defeating them, arrangements were made to ensure that trade routes would still exist and technology would still be shared with the United States from the Commonwealth and England. So this arrangement was made, and in fact back then England and France were not enemies at all. So it wasn't like you see in the movies or you read about it. It was just simply a group of guys who wanted to continue slavery where they were, opposed the law that George II brought in. So that's a bit about the trade routes and what went on in the medieval days in the forming of trade routes between nations, which later led to the Commonwealth. I'm the Archangel Daniel, and I'm from heaven.